Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on the Circadian Rhythms by Tiptop Audio, which is this big module right here. It's effectively a gate/trigger sequencer, so you have 8 different channels that you can use to program drums, or even use gates to program envelope generators, so you can do more melodic stuff as well. I'm going to quickly go over the front panel and show you how to use it, and I'm not going to cover all the different functionalities because there's a lot going on here. But I'm going to cover most of it, enough at least to get you to program simple patterns and be familiar with how to use it. So let's get started. All right, so let's quickly go over the front panel. Over here, you have your 8 output jacks for gates and triggers. This knob controls the tempo. This knob controls the swing amount. And then you have your clock and reset in and out. So you can use the master clock here, which is pretty solid, to master clock the rest of your modular, or you can feed some external clock to slave this module as well. And then you have your giant grid of buttons here. And for the most part, you can think of this as sort of your TR-808 style buttons where you can control the steps of all the different rhythms you want. The rightmost column here is sort of special. It controls how you view the steps here. So there are different modes in which to program your steps in, and we'll go over those later. But for now, just remember that this is sort of your main control for how you view the buttons here. And then the rest here is sort of a combination. You can either use this text here that's outlined to access different options, or you can use all of these to control the steps for each of the channels, depending on what view you're in. I know this may have sounded a little complicated. It'll make a lot more sense once we actually start programming, but just know that for the most part, you're controlling steps. And then in certain modes, you have access to all the different functionality like muting, copy pasting, looping, enabling swing, etc., etc. So let's go and try to program a simple rhythm because I think it'll demystify and simplify everything. So before we get started, I think it's helpful to understand how the patterns are organized. So we have a concept of a group, a channel, a preset, and a step. You have 8 groups. Each group has 8 presets. Each preset has a collection of 8 channels. And then for each channel, you have 8 steps that you can program in. So you might be wondering, is this module limited to just 8 steps? Well, no, because you can layer things, what's called a loop. So you can loop presets together and groups together to create really long patterns. And we'll go over that later once we start programming. But just remember that you have groups, presets, channels, and steps. And that's sort of like your Russian doll architecture here. All right, the simplest thing to do is to program a simple pattern. So I'm going to plug in my gate outputs here into my drum modules here. So we'll be able to audition some sounds. All right, so if you remember on the right here, we have our different view modes. So you have vertical mode, which is what we're in right now. And then you have a bunch of different horizontal modes, which gives you more standard TR style control. We're in vertical mode right now. Vertical mode means that everything is treated as columns vertically. So you have your way to select a group, select a preset, select a channel, program your steps. Then you have your mute/solo. And then the last 3 columns here, depending on what text is written above the button, gives you secondary functions. So let's just focus on the basics for now. Let's start off here. So I have my first group selected, my first preset selected, my first channel selected, which I have a kick drum plugged into. And then we have our 8 steps here going down vertically. So the simplest thing to do is to program a little pattern. So if I put in my kick here, and if you remember, this knob controls the tempo. And as you turn it, you can see the BPMs are actually written out here, which is kind of cool. So that's basically how you program it. You switch to a different channel. I can put my snare drum. I can put a hi-hat here. Different sounds here. And you can stop everything by holding this button here. And when you stop it, it actually saves all your patterns. And you actually have to stop it to save it, so remember that. And I can hit play again. And then you have your mute buttons here, so I can mute my channel, mute the kick, mute the snare, mute everything. And if you hold mute, it actually solos that one. You can hold it again. So right now we've only programmed the first group, first preset. We can switch to a different preset and you can see it's empty. So I can go back to my first channel, I can program a different kick pattern, a different snare pattern, And then you can switch between your presets. And again, you can have up to 8 presets. And then all of this is happening in the first group, so you can actually switch to your second group, and now you have a completely different empty set, and you can start programming again. I can switch to my first group, second preset, second group, first preset. So you can get a feel for how you can quickly jump around and create long patterns like that. So right now, you notice that I'm switching presets by hand. But you can actually chain things together via the concept of looping. And the way to do that is you hit set loop, and then in set loop mode, you select which presets you want to be looped. So in this case, I can select all of these presets, or I can just say, okay, loop the first 2 presets. And the way to turn on looping is to press loop on for presets here. So now you can see it's toggling between those 2 presets. And of course, you can loop presets that aren't necessarily tied together. So if I go to set loop, I can go, okay, you're going to loop 1, 2, and 5. And if you want to clear things, you can push clear. And then you can either select a channel, a preset, or an entire group to clear. So if I press the group now, it clears all the presets in that group. So it gives me a clean slate to work on. So that covers the basics of how to program a beat in vertical mode. And the advantage of vertical mode is that it allows you to switch groups, presets, and channels on the fly. The other modes are more traditional horizontal sequencer modes that you would see in like a DAW, Fruity Loops, or like a TR-808 drum machine. And you have 8x8, 4x16, 2x32, and 1x64. And what this means, it just gives you different grids of how many presets you are accessing at a time. So this goes hand in hand with the loop mode. So for example, if I only have 1 preset looping, so I have basically 8 steps going at a time. If I switch to 8x8, each channel has its own row now, and then you have your 8 steps here. So this is sort of your traditional grid view. So you can program a beat here. If you switch to 4x16, you effectively get 4 different channels per sort of view. And for each channel, you get to program 16 steps at a time. And the way to change channels is you can scroll up and down here. So for example, in the first view now, the first 2 rows are channel 1, second 2 rows are channel 2, etc. And this goes hand in hand with the loop feature. So if I hit play now and go back to 416, you can see that I'm still only looping 8 steps at a time. So if I program a beat here, it's not actually going to get played. So the way you have to do this is that you have to add more presets to your loop points. So for example, if I go to set loop again and select my 2 presets at a time and turn on preset loop, if you remember now, it's going to loop preset 1 and 2, and each one is 8 steps. So by looping them together, we're getting 16 steps. So if I go back to 416, now you can see that my kick drum has 2 rows up here, and I can program all 16 steps at once. And similarly for the other channels. So if I switch to 2x32, you get a similar concept, except this time you have 2 channels and 32 steps each at a time. And again, you have to add more loop points. So right now I'm only looping 2 presets. So effectively we're only looping 16 steps at a time. So these last 2 16 steps are being ignored. So again, the process is you go back here, you add 2 more presets to your loop point, and then I can go back to 2x32, and now we have a full set of resolution to play with. So again, what's happening here, I'm in 2x32, which means that I have my first 4 rows here. So my full 32 steps for the kick drum, and then full 32 steps for the snare drum. And then you can toggle down to go to different channels. So you have access to everything that way. So let's stop that for now. So this may have gone a little more confusing. So let me sort of repeat it again, because it took me a while to get my head around this as well. So again, each preset has 8 steps. So you can think of a preset as a unit of 8. So if you wanted to have a 16-step pattern, you have to chain 2 presets together. If you want a 32-step pattern, you need to chain 4 presets, etc. And these go hand in hand with these view modes here. So again, if you're an 8x8, you're seeing 8 steps per channel per sort of view unit. If you go to 4x16, then you have 16 steps for each channel that you can program at a time, which means that you're seeing 4 channels and 16 steps for that channel per view. And when I say view, is basically what you're seeing here, and then you can sort of toggle up and down to see the next area of views to control. So one other way to demo this, let me clear my group here. Go to my set loop. I'm going to enable all the presets. So what this means is that we're going to have a 64 step pattern where each preset is going to play once and then go to the next and the next and the next, effectively chaining 8 sets of 8 steps, giving us a full 64 step pattern. And the way we're going to program this, I'm going to go to the 1/64. So this is the last resolution mode. So in this mode, effectively every page we see here gives us all 64 steps to program. And then you go to the next page, which in this case corresponds to the next channel. And then you have all 64 steps for the snare drum. So if I go back here and hit play, if I go back to my 1/64, you can see all 64 steps are playing. So if I program a little kick drum here, what this allows you to do is create really long patterns. So you have a full control over 64 different steps. Then I can go down to my snare drum, add a bunch of snare drums. You can add variation. Go back. So this allows you to add a lot of variety to your sequence, so you're not just getting like a 16-bar loop all the time. So let's stop that. I'm going to clear my group again. All right, so hopefully that made sense. It's a little hard to explain, but effectively you're just programming 8 steps at a time, and then you're chaining those 8 steps to create longer patterns. And then you just have different resolutions of like what window you're looking at into your sequence, just for convenience sake. So you can use any of these modes to program the same pattern. It just gives you different view into what you're looking at. Another thing that's useful is the ability to copy and paste both channels, presets, and groups. And the way you do this is, let's say I'm in vertical mode now. Let's say I have my group 1, preset 1, channel 1, and I program a simple pattern here. And let me go down and add a snare drum. So let's say if I go to preset 2 now, it's empty. Let's say I wanted that same pattern in preset 2. You could just press copy and then select what thing you want to copy. So I want to copy preset 1. The copy button turns green, indicating that there's data in there. Then I hit paste and then select where I want to paste. So I want to paste into preset 2. So now if I go to preset 2, you see the same rhythm. So this is a good way to get a baseline. For example, you can copy your pattern through all the different presets, and then you can chain those presets together and add variations so that you get a slight different variation every time you loop around. So for example, if I go to loop, I'm going to remove all of these so that we're only looping the first 2 presets. I'm going to turn on looping. So now we're cycling between preset 1 and 2, but I copy pasted so that you're hearing the same thing. But for example, if I go into my 8x8 or sorry 4x16 grid, you can see that the patterns are identical, but I can add, for example, a different kick drum pattern for the second time around. All right, so initially we talked about looping presets, which effectively just means chaining presets together. You can also do the same thing for groups, which allows you to create really long and varied rhythms. So it functions in the same way. You go to set loop. And so for example, for group 1, I'm going to set the first 2 presets. Group 2, again, first 2 presets. If I hit set loop again, I can select my 2 groups here. And then to enable group looping, you push this button here. I'm going to get out of my set loop mode. So if I hit play now, I have no programs inside, but you can see by the lights here, it goes group 1, preset 2, then group 2, preset 1, preset 2. And it keeps toggling that way. And again, you don't have to put these that are next to each other. You can loop, for example, group 1 and 5 only. And then for group 1, you can loop presets 1, 2, 7. So you can create all kinds of different combinations of your patterns. So we can go and program our pattern here. So I'm going to go to group 1, preset 1, channel 1, put in a basic pattern, channel 2. Just going to put a random pattern for now. And then what I can do is I can copy preset 1 into preset 2. and I'm going to copy group 1 into group 2. So effectively I have that pattern now for all 4 presets. So preset 1 and 2 for group 1 and preset 1 and 2 for group 2. So if I hit play, we're going to hear the same thing. And if I enable looping, and so now as it's playing, I can start toggling the different steps depending on what steps it's in. So you can quickly add variation for the next time it goes around the loop. So right now we have standard degrees of notes divisions here, but let's say you wanted to add very fine-grained timing like 8th note triplets or 16th notes or 32nd notes. You don't have access to that here because you only have 8 divisions. The way you go deeper and see the steps in between is by hitting zoom here. And in zoom mode, you get a view for one specific channel at a time. So right now you can see my hi-hat pattern is here, and I can change that in the standard way here. Just you can see what's going on. But then you have 6 additional steps in between to get micro timing. So for example, if I add this here, you can see you can get very quick rhythms. And then the last 2 columns here give you convenience to switch between your preset and a channel. So of course I can go to my snare drum and add a pattern here, but also add micro timing. So you can get these sort of drum rolls going on. Another cool feature is this ability to add fills, which just gives you like a note repeat function. So let's go and program our simple kick again. And let's say I wanted to add a burst of hi-hats, but not actually programming in the beat, just kind of perform it live. The way you do that is with the fill feature. So in vertical mode, you have this little fill button here. If I push it once, it enables fill mode. And now these little trigger buttons here, you have 8 of them corresponding to all the different channels. As you hold the button, it'll repeat that trigger depending on some resolution that you set. So if I hit fill again, now you have the ability to select the resolution you want between these 4 steps here. So for example, if I want to repeat my hi-hat, you can just hold it down and it repeats it. And it doesn't actually record it, it's just something you can use for live performance. And then of course you can change the resolution. And then the highest. And you can trigger multiple things at the same time. Etc., etc. Another thing you can do is record patterns in real time. And the way you do that is by holding fill until it turns red. And then the trigger buttons here become your sort of trigger buttons that you can use to record. So let me just put in a kick drum by hand just so we have a backing rhythm to go with. And then if I hold fill, you can see that the trig buttons turn red, means that they're sort of ready for recording. And so now I can just perform this in real time. The other thing you can do is introduce a bit of swing, and I remember there's this little swing knob here to control the swing amount, but you actually have to enable swing per channel. So let's program again a simple pattern. And if I hit swing, it enables swing, and if I hold it, you get to select on a per channel level. So for example, let's say I want to enable swing for everything except the kick drum. So now I can increase the swing amount. When the swing button is green, it's giving you 8th note swing. And if you switch it to red by pressing it again, it turns it into a 16th note swing. You can go to the extreme here, or make it more subtle. This is no swing. Another thing you can do is generate random notes or chaos. And you can do that with the random/chaos button here in vertical mode. So you hit random. When it's green, it'll just insert random steps. When it's red, it'll insert random sort of micro steps. So similarly, if you were to go into the zoom mode. So if I go to random and I hit channel 1, for example, it just added some random pattern. I can add random snare drum, random hi-hat. And just like that, we have a completely random pattern. And to demonstrate the zoom mode, if I go to red, and we can add some chaos to our hi-hat, for example. So in addition to firing just triggers for standard drum modules, you can actually fire gates as well. And the advantage of gates is that you can use it for something like an ADSR. So the longer the gate is, the longer you stay in the sustain stage, for example. So right now I've patched in my 8th channel to an envelope generator off screen, just to demonstrate the concept. So again, let's program our standard kick drum just to get some kind of backing rhythm here. And then if I go to my 8th channel, so the way you program a gate is that you hold one step and you hold another step, and then it'll chain the steps between them to create a single gate. So for example, if I want to create a gate from step 1 to 4, I hold 1 and 4. You can see they turn red now. And now my gate is from here is controlling my ADSR, or technically I'm using the mats as an envelope generator. But effectively it's controlling the sound you're hearing, that bass line. One other feature I forgot to mention is that there's a tap tempo button in the middle here. So if you don't want to rotate this knob and you have a tempo in mind, you can always tap this button here. And next to that, you have a reset button. Every time you push it, it resets the pattern back to step 1. All right, so hopefully that gives you a good idea of what this module can do. I obviously left out a bunch of different more technical, nuanced features, but I wanted to keep this video focused mainly on just creating sounds and patterns. And some of the features I like are the 1x64 view. So viewing 64 steps in one go without having to switch pages is kind of cool. Most sequencers, you're stuck with 16 steps at a time and you have to sort of page through to program the rest. The other cool feature is the zoom mode. So the ability to add these quick bursts of fills in between notes is pretty neat. I admit I was a little confused at the beginning and intimidated by this module. So there is a bit of a learning curve, but once you get through the manual and you sort of wrap your head around the different view modes in combination with looping presets, then everything just starts to flow and you start to understand the advantages and sort of the design decisions behind this module here. For example, in vertical mode is sort of your like technical hub where you have all your sort of controls like copy pasting, random, swing, and all that. And you have quick access to groups, channels, and presets. So it's sort of like your overview, home, dashboard view. And then you have your standard TR style resolutions here. And that kind of removes the clutter and you can ignore all these like functions and you can focus purely on the rhythm. So that's kind of neat to have. All right, so hopefully if you were confused or intimidated by this module like I was, you have sort of a better sense of how to use it and what it can do. And thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're into synthesizers, and I'll see you guys in the next one.